You know, after finishing this game, it felt like an action-packed Doctor Who episode. That's actually pretty cool. Yo, what is up guys, this is Tyranic Swine here and welcome to another game review, and this time I am reviewing Quantum Break. Now, this is a third-person shooter that is being developed by Remedy Entertainment, and it centers on a man named Jack Joyce, who ends up going to seeing his friend at a university about something about a time machine and seeing how it works. But then things go wrong, and Jack ends up getting time manipulation powers. And then his friend, who is the CEO of a massive company, ends up being his enemy, and then is trying to basically enforce the end of time happening after the time machine experiment failed, and Jack Joyce is the one who has to stop him. So, I would say the characters of this game are pretty, like, in between. It's like, they're not great, but they're not crap. I'd say they're in between. I'd say they are alright. The main character himself is okay, along with other certain characters that you see along the way. But the best characters are those who played the villains, and I feel like they actually were the ones who put in the most effort into the acting. I honestly like the villains in this game more than the good characters, the friendly characters. I felt like they just didn't put in quite as much effort as they could have done, but yeah, as you can see. Story-wise, when it comes to science fiction, time travel is always a sweet spot for me because I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and this practically is a time travel game of pretty much. And I really do like those kind of situations in a video game where time is a massive thing. And the story overall, I'd say the plot, it was actually pretty decent for the game, for what the game's telling. But I felt like there were some loopholes here and there, and some parts they did drag on a bit with some things, and it's not the best story, but it's not the worst. It's like I said, it's like with the characters, it's kind of in between. It's like hit and miss, really. It's Quantum Break's story. And since this is only a single-player game that revolves purely around the plot, that doesn't really help it a lot. But overall, the story was interesting when it comes along explaining the relevance of time and time travel. It actually did it pretty well. It was understandable, at least. Now, the mechanics of the game are very interesting, I will say, for other games that I've seen. Now, because since you can manipulate time, you have time powers, and there's a decent amount of them. There's at least about 5 or 6 different powers. There is Time Rush, which is an ability that allows you to dash next to an enemy and perform an immediate melee takedown when the time comes. That's a pretty useful power when it comes to like getting out of situations where there's a large amount of enemies. There's Time Blast, which is basically like a sort of a time grenade or something, which helps you take out multiple enemies. There is Time Stop, which can solidify an enemy in place, and if you shoot at it, shoot at the bubble, the enemies inside, it causes damage to them. So it's always a neat power when you're trying to stop an enemy in your tracks. Then there is Time Shield, which is obviously, as you can see, is used for deflecting the enemy's bullets off of you, but it can also be used for healing yourself, and I always found this power very useful when it was in sticky situations, when it was always a large group of enemies. And then there is also Time Dodge, which is a quick evasion mechanic. And overall, I will say these powers, I actually really enjoyed them. They actually did pretty good work on how these powers worked, and some of them wouldn't always be useful against each type of enemy, because there is different types of enemies in the game. There's at least you have the normal soldier enemy types, then there's also Juggernaut enemies, which are harder to take down, and not all powers are useful on them. And then there's these two other enemy types. There's enemies called strikers. That's the word I was looking for. That can also use the same powers you have by wearing a specific suit that can help them move around during the time stutters. And these guys were quite a challenge to take down because they have the same powers as you. So the time stop power and some of the others weren't exactly as useful against them. So you had to really be you really had to think of what powers or how to defeat them really. And which ones will work against them. And then there's also where you have the Juggernaut and Strikers put together, and those are kind of like mini bosses in the game. And the only way you could defeat them was having to try and get behind them and shoot at the power pack. And they also have grenade launchers, so they are pretty difficult to take on, all the Juggernaut Strikers. And they were interesting enemies. There's not a whole lot of enemy variations in this game, to be fair, honestly. It's like you just have your normal soldiers, Juggernauts, and then you just have the special variations of them. You have special normal infantry types, and then you have the special Juggernauts. So really, enemy type wise, there's not that much as well. So I was a little disappointed by that, especially when this game has time travel mechanics. You'd think there could be something else that would help out for the enemy types, that would make things a little bit more tougher. And the amount of weaponry in the game too is not that much either, since you have only a few pistols, a few SMGs, an LMG, an assault rifle, a carbine, a few shotguns. There's not many weapons in the game either. But I let this one slide because you mainly need to rely on your time powers, really. Because this game is all about time travel, really. So if it was mainly focusing on the guns and the weapons, then it would be failing in its objective. So really by the amount of weapons in the game, but because there's so few weapons, you kind of get a bit bored of what there is to pick up on the battlefield. Now, you can also upgrade your powers by finding Chronon sources, as this game does have collectibles to find throughout the game. But really, even though the documents and all that have a lot of information on them, I'd say there's too much information to read from, and you get pretty bored very quickly trying to read them all. But the better collectible to find, which is the Chronon sources, is which helps you upgrade your powers. But I must say the upgrades aren't particularly that done well, I'd say. There's not very many. There's like most of the powers have like 3 upgrades, and some of them only have 2. And since you only have like 6 powers overall, it's not that much considering the powers you have. So yeah, and the collectibles aren't really that rewarding either. But there is some that have a kind of an effect on the timeline. These quantum tangles, which if you find them, they will like have an effect on the interactive TV show after you complete an act. But there's not very many quantum tangles really in the game that like has a major effect on the game. And so yeah, which does actually cause a bit of a problem, really. It's like there's not very many of them. So yeah. Also, every time you do complete an act of the game, you always have to make a decision on what's going to happen. You have 2 choices, and at the end, and after you make a choice, there is an interactive TV episode, like live action TV episode kind of thing, that shows your choice that you made. But even though there's 2 choices, the ending is always the same. So yeah, so you won't find much variety. But because the game also centers around that the past cannot be changed, it kind of contradicts itself, and it's like you can't really find a win here with the ending. It's really difficult to find a win because it's like the past never changes, but the ending is always the same no matter what choice you pick. So yeah, it's kind of difficult to like think of the ending as well. But I will say, the TV show kind of part of it was actually pretty interesting, because this is one of those very few games that's done this. It's like you play the game, you finish an act, and you make a decision, and it has like about a 22-minute episode of the choice you made. And I will say, it was pretty interesting watching these. I mean, it actually did feel like most TV shows that are around with us today, except it could have used a bit more. Probably the acting could have been a little bit better, but it wasn't boring to death. It was watchable, like considering a lot of other TV shows I've watched. And honestly, I'd say it was done all right. Was the TV shows, but I don't know if it was entirely necessary for this game, really. So in the end, I don't know if it was really worth the effort for it to have gone down this route, but yeah. I will say though, during the story, there is a few points during the game that where these time stutters show you like the effect of what it does, and they're actually pretty damn cool. Like there's at least about 2 or 3 moments with the whole time stutter thing, and it was pretty cool seeing like everything freeze around you, and while you had to navigate your way through this debris of objects while they were all like stuttering around while time is slowly being destroyed. And it was actually interesting seeing these moments, and it was pretty interesting. But these moments are too far in between the fighting and navigating parts of the game. And I will say the level design is very linear and wasn't entirely awe-inspiring and interesting to look at. It was just mainly you just get from one area to the next, and then you fight a bunch of bad guys, and then there's always that one moment in the game where you have to like get through a stutter part, a time stutter, which is pretty much the most interesting part. And the game does actually have a final boss fight, but it's pretty disappointing compared to other boss fights I've fought against. And I will say another thing, the loading times in this game are pitifully slow. It's like, I don't get why the loading times are really slow. And it's like every time you die, it's really annoying, along with the checkpoints too. The checkpoints aren't very good either, so yeah. That's like a few other things that are not particularly done well. It's like, the loading is really annoying. You will get more annoyed at it, especially when you keep dying in some of the same areas. Like for example, when some of the time stutters have you having to go through a door which is continuously closing, and if you die on that, the loading is a pain in the ass. So yeah. So Quantum Break overall is, for an exclusive, I wouldn't say it's done particularly. Yeah, it wasn't done bad and it wasn't done great. It's not really the best game that's been. It wasn't really a brilliant game, but it had a decent plot to it. Some of the characters were all right, and because it's a time travel kind of thing, I really do like that kind of thing. But and it also does have pretty cool time manipulative powers, but with lack of variation in the enemies, the level design, and the loading, and a lot of other gaming mechanics that weren't particularly done well, along with was the whole TV aspect of the game really necessary, I'm gonna give Quantum Break overall a 7 out of 10. So, that is my review of Quantum Break. An exclusive, really, that could have been done better, but at least wasn't too bad to play, and at least it had a good time travel plot in it. Well, a decent one at least. Not as good as like what you see in Doctor Who, but it was a good attempt nonetheless by Remedy Studios. And so yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Leave a like, put a comment down below of what you think of the game, and I will see you guys in the next random video.